Hello, my name is Tielei Wang. I'm a research scientist at Georgia Tech. Thank you very much for coming to my talk. I know the other room is having the best paper. And in this talk, I'm going to discuss the feasibility of large-scale infections of iOS devices. And this is the outline of my talk. At the beginning, I will give the background of the work and introduce our research motivation. After that, I will show you several attack instances that can demonstrate the security risks in connecting iOS devices to compromised personal computers. And in order to show these attacks are very realistic, we also conducted a large-scale measurement. So I will present our measurement methodology and also the measurement results that can show you that there's a large overlap between iOS devices and also compromised Windows machines. Finally, I will conclude the talk and answer your questions. Let's start from the background. It's well known that actually Apple has a very restricted app distribution model. So basically, all third-party apps have to be reviewed by Apple before they can be published on the App Store. Last year, we published a paper titled Jekyll on iOS and the USENIX Security Symposium. In that work, we created a seemingly benign app. We call it Jekyll and publish it on the App Store. Jekyll app doesn't contain any malicious logic, but it contains some intended vulnerabilities. By exploiting such vulnerabilities, we can remotely instruct Jekyll app to carry out a number of malicious tasks by just reordering and rearranging the normal functionalities. The conclusion is that because of some fundamental challenges, Apple cannot prevent malicious apps on the App Store. However, there's a key limitation in the Jekyll apps. So basically, Jekyll apps may only affect a very limited number of iOS users who accidentally download and run the Jekyll apps. Here is the reason. Now, App Store has more than 1 million apps. So Jekyll apps, also like other apps, will have the same challenge of attracting the attentions from the user. So very likely, nobody will notice a Jekyll app on the App Store and never download and run the Jekyll app. On the other hand, because Apple has the full control of the App Store, once if a malicious app is detected, Apple can easily remove it from the App Store. So the motivation in our current work is to figure out whether it's possible to proactively deliver malicious apps to iOS devices at scale. With this goal in mind, we reviewed the app distribution channels and also the installation methods. And finally, we confirmed that personal computers are becoming a new attack vector to iOS devices. There are so many reasons that the iOS user would like to connect their iPhone or iPad to personal computers, like backing up, restoring, syncing, charging, and so on. But if you look at the iTunes software running on the PC side, it's able to install and remove apps. It can also access data in the mobile device. So we believe such functionalities also open a door for attackers. The contributions of the paper are the following. First, we demonstrate several attack instances that can demonstrate the security risks. And so the attack model in our paper is that actually your personal computer is already compromised by a remote attacker, and now you connect your phone to the computer, what security risk it is. And second, we also conducted a large-scale measurement, and our measurement results show that there is a big overlap between iOS devices and the compromised Windows PCs. Now let's go through the security risks and look at the attack instance. The first attack is that we show we are able to deliver Jekyll apps at scale. The intuition is this: if your computer is already controlled by the remote attacker, and now if you connect your phone to the computer, and the attacker can remotely instruct your computer to inject Jekyll apps to the plugged-in iOS devices. The idea seems very easy, but there's a great challenge caused by the digital rights measurement technology in iOS, which can effectively prevent users from sharing apps among up to a number of iOS devices. Let me explain this a little bit. So basically, to download apps from the App Store, we require an Apple account. Basically, it's a pair of the Apple ID and the password. Without knowing the victim's Apple ID and the password, attackers cannot download and install apps on behalf of the victim. But if we try to run some apps downloaded by a different Apple ID on our iOS device, you will see that iOS is able to detect the DRM violation. And after iOS 6, if you do that, you will see a pop-up window on your iOS device, which will ask for the correct Apple ID and password. If you are not able to input the correct Apple ID and password, iOS will refuse to run the app. So for attackers, that means you have to know, you have to either know the victim's Apple ID and password, or you need a way to bypass the DRM protection. Our paper focuses on how to bypass the DRM protection. And by chance, we found a very interesting thing. So one day we connected an iOS device to an iTunes software program. They are using different Apple IDs. But we noticed that even they have different Apple IDs, the iTunes can still sync the apps in its library into the iOS devices. After the synchronization, all the apps purchased by the Apple IDA, that means the Apple ID in the iTunes, these apps can still run on the iOS side. And we manually reverse engineered the syncing process, and we confirmed several key steps in the synchronization process. We described these steps in our paper. Please refer to our paper for the details. And we also figured out the data exchanged between the iTunes software and the iOS device. And finally, we realized that actually the synchronization process can also be done remotely. And this figure shows the idea of the remote synchronization. So basically, the computer in the middle represents the already compromised computer. And the computer on the left means the attacker's own computer. Basically, the attacker can ask the local computer to send a special synchronization request to iOS device. And finally, after that, it can also ask the local computer to redirect the USB traffic, the critical data, to the attacker's own computer. By reusing the iTunes code, basically we can reverse engineer the software and identify which function is used to generate the authentication data. We just reuse that piece of code, and the attacker can remotely generate the authentication data and send it back to the local computer. And the local computer can finally finalize the synchronization process. So by doing this, instead of syncing with the local computer, your iOS device can be synced with a remote computer. So that means all the apps downloaded by the attacker's Apple ID can also run on your iOS device without showing the pop-up window. And here is a short summary of the attack. So first, the attacker can remotely instruct a already compromised computer to install Jekyll apps on a connected iOS device, completely bypassing the DRM checks. More importantly, even if the app is already removed from the App Store, the attackers can still distribute their own copies to iOS users. So in our experiments, we already removed the Jekyll app from the App Store, but we are still able to deliver our own copies to different iOS devices that are running with different Apple IDs, which implies that although Apple has the full control over the App Store, the attackers can still leverage this attack to build a covert distribution channel of iOS apps. And the second attack is that we showed is we are able to deliver attacker-signed apps. The background is this: to enable third-party developers to test their own app on physical devices, Apple allows a provisioning process. Basically, you just turn your device into a developer mode. After that, the developer can sign their own app and run them on the physical device. But what we found is that the whole provisioning process can be done without the user knowledge. So basically, if you connect your phone to the computer can still provision your device. After that, the attacker can install any app signed by themselves. This will introduce a lot of security threats. For example, the attacker can remove certain targeted apps, like your banking apps, and then they can install any app that looks same as the banking app. It's very easy to launch phishing attacks. And the third attack is, in addition to installing apps, we find the PC can also get some credentials of the apps. The background is this. iOS has a well-confined sandbox policy. Basically, each app has a unique home directory for its data, and apps are restricted from accessing other apps' data. And because of this, many app developers just presume that iOS sandbox can protect the data. So they just store the username, some credentials in plain text. For example, the Starbucks app was reported that it stores the username and password in plain text. And Starbucks believe that it's not a big deal. However, the threat model will be changed a lot if you put the computer in the picture. Because if you connect your phone to the personal computer, the computer, from a USB connection, the computer side is able to access all the contents of the apps. So it's very easy to get the credentials if you don't encrypt them. And the proof of a concept, we implemented a tool that can retrieve the cookies of Facebook and the Gmail apps. By reusing these cookies, we can successfully log into the iOS user's account. And although we only demonstrate the attacks against Facebook and Gmail apps, we believe that a lot of apps that are similar to Facebook and Gmail apps will be affected. And in order to show that these attacks are very realistic, we also conducted a large-scale measurement. And the goal of the measurement is to quantitatively estimate how many iOS users would like to connect their iOS devices to compromised personal computers. Basically, we want to estimate the overlap between the two cycles. And we have two main datasets. The first dataset is a DNS query dataset. We obtained this dataset from two large ISPs in the United States. Basically, the dataset contains more than 50 million client IDs. A client ID, you can see, is a unique hash of IP address. And we get the data for 5 days in October 2013. And we also have a labeled command and control domain name set. We get this dataset from a security company called Damballa. This company is tracking many botnets. So they know a lot of CNC domain names used by the botnets. And so basically, given an IP address, we can determine what DNS queries issued from this IP address in that day. But because of the common use of the network address translation technique, we cannot determine how many or what kind of device behind that IP address. Basically, you may have Windows, Mac OS, Android, iOS, or maybe other computers behind the IP address. So the first step we did is we want to determine the bot population. The idea is this: given the IP address, we just check whether this IP address queried any known CNC domain names. If so, we believe that there must be an infected Windows machine under that IP address, because all the botnet samples tracked in by Damballa are for Windows. So we can confirm there is an infected Windows machine. And the second step is we want to exclude Mac OS. So the intuition is this: if you have both Windows machine and the Mac OS machine, very likely you will connect your iPhone to Mac OS rather than Windows. So, but all the malware samples we have are for Windows. So we want to exclude Mac OS in our experiments. And since version 10.6 Mac OS is set to automatically check for security updates daily. And we also identified the domain names for the security updates. So what we did is we just checked whether that IP address checked the 5 domain names in a day. If so, we believe that there is a Mac OS. In that case, we just exclude that IP address in our experiments. And the third step is to determine the coexistence of iOS device as well as infected Windows machines. We find some unique domain names that can only be generated by some certain iOS apps. For example, the weather app, the stocks app, and also the location service. So we just, among the IP address that has demonstrated the infected Windows machines, we further check whether we can find DNS queries issued by iOS device. If so, we can confirm that there is also a iOS device behind the IP address. But using a Windows machine and an iOS device doesn't mean the user would connect iOS device to the Windows machine. So we need more evidence. So, but the question is, connecting iOS device to a personal computer, this process itself doesn't generate any observable network traffic. Based on the DNS query dataset, we cannot 100% make sure whether the user would connect the iOS device to the computer. So here we made an assumption. That is, if iTunes is installed and the user also uses the iTunes software on Windows to purchase something from the App Store, we'll assume that the user will eventually connect the iOS device to the computer. Because for the apps you downloaded from App Store can only run on iOS device. If you buy them from the Windows iTunes, finally you will connect them to transfer the apps to the iOS device. But the challenge here is that we find the network traffic generated by Windows iTunes are very similar to the traffic generated by the App Store app on the iOS. So it's very hard to distinguish whether the purchase is issued by Windows or by the iOS. Fortunately, we found another very interesting thing. That is, every 30 minutes, iOS device will ping a special server on the internet. That's designed for the push notification. So we reverse engineered the push notification daemon on iOS, and we find every 30 minutes, iOS device will ping that server. So it's kind of a heartbeat DNS query. We just use this to distinguish whether the iTunes purchase, the App Store purchase is issued from Windows or iOS. The idea is this: before 1 hour and after an hour of the purchase, if we cannot see any DNS, the iOS heartbeat DNS query, we just treat, okay, this purchase is done by iTunes. So using this methodology, we find in general 23% of all the bot population have connections with iOS devices. And there's the detailed data for the 5 days. And okay, now let me quickly conclude the talk. And basically, we demonstrate 3 attacks. And the first attack is we can bypass Apple DRM and install any Jekyll apps. And the second is we can provision the device and install any attacker-signed malicious apps. And the computer can also be used to steal app credentials. Our measurement shows that 23 of the botnet population have connections with iOS device. I'm glad to answer your question. Thank you.
Quick, this is Yossi Oren from Colombia. Thank you for the nice talk. Your second attack about provisioning devices, it's not a wide-scale attack. You need to pay $100 to get to provision 100 devices. Do you have a way around that, or is this still applied to your attack?
Yeah, so that's a good question. So we did consider that problem. But we believe that the first is also valuable for the targeted attack. So you don't have to pursue the large-scale infection. Second of all, I think there are so many credit cards stolen problems on the world. So it's not hard for attackers, for the bad guys, to get the credit card information.
Okay, so this is more of a phishing-related vulnerability, a spear phishing, and not wide-scale attack.
Yes, right.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
We're only going to have time for one more question.
Hi, Manuel Egele from Boston University. Good paper, I like it very much. So what I was wondering was, in your attacker model, you assume that the attacker has control over the computer running iTunes, and then you have this USB connection. Did you actually look at whether you could also use Apple's Cloud Sync to install applications on the device?
Oh, so we don't have to assume that the iTunes is installed. So only in the measurement part, we want to confirm how likely the user would connect the phone to the computer. We use iTunes. But even you don't have you don't have iTunes installed on the computer, the proof of concept tools we created can also launch that attacks.
Cool.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.